My name is Leisha Emens. I'm the current president for the Society for Immunotherapy of Cancer. I'm also the founding chair of SITC's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I am one of the co-moderators of today's panel discussion. The purpose of today's listening session is to shed light on the professional and personal experiences of women in science and medicine. The panel features leaders representing various career levels and institutions around the country. The comments made today are not meant to generalize or represent the entire experience of all women professionals. SITC hopes today's panel is a contribution to efforts to share and appreciate the experiences of women and other represented minority or other underrepresented communities within the scientific field as we seek to promote and enhance diversity in the clinical and biomedical research space. Now I'd like to ask my co-moderator, Dr. Charlie Garnett-Benson, to introduce herself.
Hello all, my name is Charlie Garnett-Benson and I am a translational medicine scientist and team lead at Bristol Myers Squibb, responsible for IO drugs and targeted drugs in solid tumor oncology. I'm also the co-chair of SITC's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and a former past chair of the Early Career Scientist Committee back in 2015. So I welcome you all to this panel, and now I'd like to ask each of the panelists if you'd be willing to introduce yourself and maybe share one thing about your work that you're currently most excited about, or something that motivates you in your career as a woman in the field today. So we'll start with you, Dr. Anderson.
Hello, my name is Anna Anderson. I am at Harvard Medical School, where I'm an associate professor. My lab is located at the Jean Lay Institute of Immunology and Inflammation, where I lead the Cancer Immunology Research Program. I think we are in a very exciting time in science. I feel for the first time that women's voices are increasingly being heard. I am seeing more female representation at meetings, and I think it's really the time that we can start to affect real change.
Dr. Butterfield?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Butterfield. I'm a distinguished scientist at Merck Research Labs in South San Francisco in the Discovery Oncology Group. I joined pharma about a little over a year ago after a long time in academia. And I have the best job in the world. I always have. I sit in the middle of translational research, bench to bedside, collaborating with my physician colleagues to take therapies out of the lab and into the clinic, and then understand what went right and what went wrong. And I work in cancer vaccines primarily, and so this is my third wave. So it's nice when what you do is thought of as important and interesting, and it's still a great job when it isn't. So happy to be here.
Great. Dr. Guerriero?
Hi, yes. Thanks so much. So I'm Jennifer Guerriero. I'm an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. My lab's at Brigham and Women's Hospital in the Harvard Cancer Center, and we study myeloid biology and T-cell interactions in breast cancer. And I think, I agree that this is such a new time where we're seeing so many female leaders taking positions that are important and meaningful and have a voice to not only take a leadership and show by example how women can lead these fields, but also to tap junior female colleagues and to give them opportunities. And I really see that happening a lot, especially by the women here on this call. But it's really an exciting time for women to be in science.
And Dr. Vanpouille-Box?
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Vanpouille-Box. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Radiation Oncology at Weill Cornell Medicine, and I am also the chair of the SITC Early Career Scientist Committee. I am passionate to find new ways to use radiation therapy to induce anti-tumor immunity against brain tumors, whether it's adult or for pediatric brain tumors. And I am also very excited to train the next generation and to provide opportunity for them to grow, opportunity that I myself got, but also if I can even give them even more. And I think by seeing, I remember still Dr. Garnett-Benson when she was presenting and still having her lab and was the chair of the Early Career Scientist Committee was very inspiring to me. So I hope that I can inspire the next generation the same way to show that the woman in science has a place to stay. And I think it's very exciting time. I agree with everybody here.
So that's great. I would personally like to thank you all for your time and your generosity in participating in today's panel discussion. I think it'll add a lot of value for our community. Just a few words of introduction. Based on the research that we've reviewed, we see that despite the fact that women represent 50.8% of the US population, women remain underrepresented in many areas of science and medicine, particularly in leadership positions. To share a few statistics, we know that 41% of doctoral degree recipients in science and engineering are women. Only 35% of all people employed in STEM occupations are women. And further, only 15.9% of cancer center directors are women. So we have a long way to go in bringing women along to contribute equally in science and medicine. The women on this panel today represent a variety of professions, career levels, and work settings, and all of them have achieved great success in their careers. Today, we'll discuss their experiences as a woman in the field, the support networks that have helped them along the way, and the strategies that they developed to achieve success in their careers, and the advice that they have for the next generation of women in the cancer immunotherapy community. The first thing I'd like to delve into is the support that you've received from mentors, role models, and even peers along your journeys. And I'd like to start with Dr. Anderson. Dr. Anderson, could you start us off by sharing a bit about the mentors that you've had? Did you have both male and female mentors? And if you did you find a difference in their mentorship style at all?
Thank you, Leisha, for that question. Yes, I have had both male and female mentors, and they have had different approaches to mentoring. And I'm very fortunate that I've had the same male mentors. My PhD supervisor, Vijay Kutru, is well-known immunologist, not as well-known in the cancer immunology field, very well-known outside of that. But he has continued to be my mentor even to this day, so at all stages of my career. And the benefit of having a male mentor is they are part of the establishment. So when I was shifting my career focus from autoimmune disease research to cancer immunology research, he took me to the side and introduced me to Drew Pardal. And Drew Pardal since then has always looked out for me and kind of taken me under his wing. I'm sure that some of the invitations to speak at meetings have come through his behind the scenes efforts. And so it's really having someone who's opening those doors for you that's been very, very beneficial. On the other side, Arlene Sharp has been a mentor to me. She's obviously known to everyone on this call and most everyone in the cancer immunology field. And she gave me advice on how to be a mom, how to have your children, have your family life, and also still take care of your lab. So when it was that sort of junior faculty stage that I was at, she pulled me to the side and she said, okay, these are the things that I've learned how to do over the years. So I will stop my day at 5 or 6 p.m. I will go home and have dinner with my family, make sure my kids are all set. And then if I need to, I am back on my email, back in the lab doing whatever needs to be done, but don't shortchange your family life. So it's been really nice to see sort of both mentorship styles and also getting the different type of advice from people.
That's great. That's actually very complimentary, right? So it's even holistic, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'd like to move on to Dr. Guerriero. Dr. Guerriero, what role did mentors play in helping you as a woman in your career journey? And are there any that have played a particularly important role as you face challenges in your career?
Yeah. So I think, I've had many different mentors, different styles of mentoring that have all played, very different roles in terms of career promotion and job opportunities and networking, including many of you on this call, right? And that was stemmed from involvement in different SITC programs and serving as co-chair and then chair of the Early Career Scientist Committee. But I think, some of a little bit more unique things that maybe don't seem to be the most important thing, but at the time were really critical in helping me succeed were when I was having children, when I was bearing 3 children having them and then trying to go back to work, it was very difficult time for me. And so I had my first child when I was a postdoc. I was in Tony Latai's lab at Dana-Farber. He's an incredible scientist and mentor, and he's continued to mentor me throughout my career. But he's a man, so he did not bear children, although he has children of his own, and he's a family man. And after I had my first child, he sat me down and said, "Okay, you're back at work. How's it going?" And I through tears, I sort of said, "Tony, I'm spending so much time in this lactation room pumping to provide milk for my baby, and it's so inefficient, and I can't do anything in this room. And this is such a weird thing to talk to you about as a male boss, but it's so frustrating for me." And he said, "Oh, okay, well, what do you need?" I said, "I don't know, a desk, a computer?" And he said, "Absolutely, let's do it." He put in all the calls, and a week later there was a desk and a computer and all the lactation rooms, not just the one that I was using, and they still stand there 10 years later. And so I think I learned a really important lesson about mentors. They're there for you no matter what, and you do have to ask for help sometimes. You can't just expect the mentor knows exactly what you need, because that was, I think, a bit of a surprise request from him, but he did it. And everyone has benefited from that change in that room. So I'm really grateful for everything that I've received from mentors, even these smaller things.
That's really fantastic. Dr. Vanpouille-Box, we know that women in the field of radiation oncology, which is your area, are particularly underrepresented, with only 29.1% of the faculty in that specialty being women. Do you have a role model that motivated you to get where you are today in your field? And what role have mentors played as you move into radiation oncology and pursue your career there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was and I'm still fortunate to have and to be mentored by two amazing women, Dr. De Maria and Dr. Formenti. They really taught me how to navigate in the radiation oncology field, especially because at that time, we're talking about 2011 when IO just started. And I have to say that, the combination of radiation and IO was pretty perceived as a feminine field. And, I'm sure Charlie can support this concept. And which is very funny, because now you have a lot of radiation oncologists, male, who are very interested and are coming to us to ask for advice. So it's funny how this has been turned into in about 10 years from now, I can see really much women being involved in radiation oncology. But and Dr. Formenti show me the way, because they have successfully navigate their career and have family. I mean, Sandra De Maria has 2 kids, Dr. Formenti has 3. And so I remember when I also got my first child in my postdoc, the first question they asked me is, when do you get your second? And I was like, hold on. And I'm not sure I can get a second one, so it's just to show you that for them, they really taught me how to value not only my work and to do very great science, but also to value your family. And I think it's circling back to what Dr. Anderson mentioned with Dr. Sharp, when they told me to really pay attention and to, go to your children at 6 or 7 p.m., be with them. And if you need to work after them, you can work after them, and your kids are actually going to understand that. I remember feeling guilty when traveling, because it's your first child, and it's I have actually some people when I was traveling asking me why I was traveling and not necessarily being with my kid. But having mentors that tells you that it's okay, and are supporting this was very, I think, making a huge difference for me. And so, and aside that, they also provide me tremendous opportunity, not only for job opportunity, but for networking. I was, able to speak to very famous radiation oncologists who then saw me as a potential new PI at the time, get me interviews. And then it really tremendously increased my visibility in radiation oncology. And now, I have to say that I have been sponsored now by male colleague for AACR major symposium and some of this. But I really think that having them in the early stages of my career was really making the difference here.
That's great. Just a follow-up question on integrating family life and kids into your career activities. You know, everybody's at a different stage in their career and in their family life, but I wonder how many of you have taken your kids along with you on work-related travel. That's one way to potentially integrate thing. It may be that you need to wait till the kids are older for some of you, but I've certainly seen people do that. Dr. Anderson, I wonder if you could address that.
I have, and we turned it into a family vacation. Of course, it was the international meeting, and it was in Australia, and I was a speaker, so I had my travel was being covered. So I said, "This is our chance. You're not, this is not somewhere you can just go to on the fly." And it was a little bit of a juggling act, juggling sort of my participation in the meeting. I did participate, not just go give my talk and cut out, but it was also good for them to see that this is the career that we have. It's really like no other. We get to pursue our ideas, push the boundaries of knowledge, potentially help patients that have a devastating disease, and then we get to travel the world and tell people about it. So it's really, really amazing. And so I think that's inspirational in a way for them.
Yeah, I would agree. How about you, Dr. Guerriero or Dr. Vanpouille-Box?
Yeah, I mean, so I haven't taken my family anywhere yet. My 12-year-old daughter is particularly interested in seeing a talk and going to a meeting. And so sometimes if the Zoom allows for it, I'll send her the link and she'll watch my talk, sort of live. And I think it's, that's part of encouraging the next generation, right? The next female leaders is exposing them early to science and medicine. And, something Claire said, my daughter's so proud of me. She retweets my things and posts things about me. And when she was younger, she had won this award called Hardest Worker Award from her gymnastics team. And of course, I was very proud of her. And she came right up to me and she gave me the trophy and said, "Mom, you deserve this. You taught me how to be the hardest worker." And I just love that because they're watching us, right? She was like 7 years old, but she's watching how hard you work and the importance of what we're doing, pushing boundaries and making new medicine to help patients. And I think it's so important to expose our children to this career.
That's great. Claire?
Yeah, I would echo with what Jen said. My daughter is also one of my major fan. So unfortunately, I never brought her to any conferences just because it could not happen. But she saw me going, and I think she saw me very passionate about everything I'm doing, and like you said, pushing the boundaries. And I'm sure she knows, after I tuck her to bed, that sometimes I'm going to work on my grants, and she knows that. And the next day she's going to ask me, "So did you write very nicely yesterday, or how was it?" And so it's funny that she really have the sense of hard work already as a very young age. And I think it gives her an example on, that you can do whatever you want as long as you put effort to it. And I think that's what I really love about, even so it's indirectly related to this job, but by seeing me doing this, she sees that, for instance, if she works a little bit harder on piano, then she can, play nicely the song. And I think that's what she's doing on other things now. Yeah.
That's great. So Dr. Garnett-Benson, I haven't forgotten about you. I know that you transitioned from academia to industry at some point during your career. Could you talk about your mentors along the way and how they might have influenced that decision? And also comment on whether you've noticed differences in how women are supported between academia and in industry. And then finally, as an African-American woman, what unique strategies have you employed to get to where you are now?
Great. Thanks for the question. So I was reflecting a lot as I was thinking about this panel about the diversity of mentors that I've had. And, I think of the 5 or 6 that I'd say have been significant, mentors and sponsors. So I'll use those terms. None of them look like me. Only one of them was female, and one of them was a Black male. And that's because I went to Hampton University for undergrad. And so when I started research, and that's actually how I got excited into research, he was my research advisor, really championed me as I tried to apply for grad school and got really interested in research. And then the only female mentor that I've had was my graduate advisor for my PhD. And, she was one of those sort of very early immunologists, right, when they were still smoking in the lab, and was very much male dominated, was one of the few females, I think, of the time when she was doing her research. So she was my mentor then, and which obviously had quite a significant impact on me ultimately. But then when I made the transition to academia to start my own research lab, and be an independent investigator, I really leaned heavily on her a lot for just getting that guidance, giving me tips, budget, applying for a grant, and really the boots on the ground, give me sort of the details of strategies and tips that worked well for you, and then some that didn't work well for her. So she was really, really instrumental, Linda Gooding, in helping me sort of navigate through those waters. And then, as you can deduce, all the rest were white males. And a lot of them were really mentors, but I really would say sponsors more than a mentor, because they were in the places where they could open the door and sort of put me forward as, right, a speaker or as the person that should be presenting. And I really had two fantastic ones when I did my postdoc at the National Cancer Institute, Jeffrey Sloan, who was the lab chief, and then Jim Hodge, who was my actual mentor in my lab. And they really got me just enthusiastic and really interested in this concept of translational research, where you'd be doing the preclinical studies that's sort of informing the clinical team, and then you're getting the biomarker samples back to try to understand what's going on. This was sort of earlier days in cancer immunotherapy, looking at therapeutic cancer vaccines. But their enthusiasm, their guidance, and their sort of support and encouragement of me as I was coming up with sort of novel ideas for what about this, and if we could sort of stitch these combinations together. And they really just never told me no when I had an idea, and were very encouraging, always allowed me to go to conferences and present, and always sort of brought me in the room when we were talking with the other fantastic scientists at NCI. They would have no problem bringing me along and having me sort of speak about the data and the research. And then moving into industry, I had two male mentors there when I first started, because that is an entirely different environment, right? The norms, the behavior, the way that you interact with a team, because it's not a team that you built about your research. These are subject matter experts coming from all different areas of the company. I mean, it's an entirely different environment. So I think if I didn't have people there, my hiring manager and then my subsequent manager after that, who were really guiding me and directing me and sort of telling me the ways of this new space that I was in, but seeing that I was coming from academia, never hesitated to sort of say, there's this new big role. It's very exciting. We think you're capable of doing it. And then just sort of giving me the guidance on, these are the things that you need to know in order to handle this. And this is what the team needs. We think you can do it. You're obviously very enthusiastic about it, and never sort of hesitated as you're not an industry person, you're an academic scientist. Can you really flourish here? And at every step of the way, they just were very supportive and encouraging. And I know that they were sort of opening doors in the background to get me where I am today in a pretty short time. So have had quite a bit of support there. I think from the African-American or Black perspective, I really try to take every interaction as an N of one, right? We live in a nation that has a history, and it's very difficult to try to judge every individual based off of that backdrop. And if a person's coming to me with a preconceived notion, they haven't met me, so it certainly can't be anything that I brought to the table. So that's my opportunity to say, is there a way that we can connect? Is there something that we have in common? And just go from there. But I will say that a lot of my peer friendships that I've developed along the way have really been those things that have helped me. So Claire mentioned early career scientist. Her and I have maintained a relationship from those early days. And it's someone you can reach out to really sort of bounce ideas off of, I think more from the women perspective there. And I had several peer women colleagues when I was in academia that all had small children. We had, children the same age. And those are really the things that just sort of hold you up. And I think those are more authentic, probably, relationships and connections. And so you're kind of peer mentoring each other with, this worked for me or this didn't work for me. Don't advise that, right? And I think that's sort of been the thing that's helped me through.
That's great. Thank you very much. Now I'll turn it over to you to moderate the next section.
I'm going to kind of play off that last question that you just asked to me. And I'd like to dive into strategies that all of you or each of you as women have employed in your careers to be, successful, to become noticed, to get ahead. So Dr. Butterfield, I'd like to start with you and see if you'd be willing to start us off by sharing some examples of what has helped you build your career as a very incredibly accomplished woman in the field today.
Thank you for the kind words. I look back now and think about when I was a postdoc and going to my first meetings and looking around the room, and what I would, and I would sit in the back and just observe people interacting. And it was very clear that there were groups of highly successful individuals that were well known to each other, that invited each other to meetings in exotic locales, who worked together on projects and published high-profile papers, who worked together on grants. And I could see them over there interacting with each other, sitting together at dinner. And I thought about that, and my early mentors. I've actually never reported to a woman. And my mentor, my best early mentor, was a male MD PhD cancer surgeon who did not look like me or have a career track like mine. And so what I saw happening with my peers, how my peers a year or two advanced from me were getting to that place, was through their network. And that was facilitated by their male mentors. And when they traveled to meetings, they went to the place with geishas. They stayed over at their host's house. They went and met at the bar later. And I've had male hosts say very clearly to me that that would not be appropriate for them with me, because they don't want to be seen, getting drunk at the bar with, a female colleague. They're married, and what would people think? They wouldn't have me stay at their house. They don't know me that well. But for male colleagues, that is very different. And so I thought about how am I going to get from here to there? And I'm not going to have a lot of the advantages that some of our male colleagues have. And so, part of it is hard work, and I didn't take vacations for a long time. And I just said yes to everything. Every opportunity, yes. Present at this meeting, yes. Give your talk, male PI, for you at this meeting, yes. And just kept trying, different paths to try to get places, and walking into a room, often being the only woman at the room, and sort of looking around and thinking, okay, who's in the room? Let me see how people talk to each other. Okay, because I'm going to have to match that to be seen as part of this group and be successful here. And then go to a meeting. Okay, how do people behave on the podium? How do they talk to each other? That's what I have to do to be seen as part of this, to get to that next level. And I spent a lot of time worrying about, how I appeared to people, how I interacted with people, and how to be as strategic as possible. And that, I think that was the best early strategy I could come up with. But that sort of changed when I'd gotten at least to a certain comfort level, and I started to wonder why I still had to do all of that. Why did I have to, think all this through? And I actually heard on National Public Radio a study on women's brains, and that when women are presenting their science, they use half of their brain to present their science and the other half of their brain to worry about how they appear and how they sound. And so you're going to be less focused and coherent if you're worried about all that stuff. And so I finally made a construct in my mind of all of my male peers and male bosses and male colleagues that I saw successful, and I called that construct Bob. And so I would think in every situation, what would Bob do? Bob would not give one thought to how he appeared to other people, how aggressive he might seem, whether this was appropriate. He'd just do it. He knows what he wants, and he would go do that. So I decided every time I would start a new situation, what would Bob do? And my construct, Bob, helped me to stop worrying about a lot of this stuff and just walking into the room and doing what I need to do to accomplish my goals, and not worry about everyone else's goals and everything else. So that's really been a helpful strategy. So one is just hard work. Here's the goal. Get myself from here to there and try different ways to do that. And then the other is just, what if I didn't have two X chromosomes? What would I do? And do that.
And I'm assuming Bob was going to welcome and invite himself to the bar, right? There was no, I can't go to the bar with you. Bob is going to walk up.
Oh yeah. Bob's going to go to the bar, and Bob's going to find people he wants to talk to and just talk to them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So Dr. Vanpouille-Box, I'm going to ask you. So can you share some of your experience as an early career scientist woman, pre-COVID versus post-COVID? A lot of stuff changed. Did you have, tactics or approaches to your career as a woman that needed to shift since the pandemic? Interested in hearing a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I started my lab just before COVID, and at that time, I actually had the chance to get some great advice from several women in the field, not necessarily in radiation oncology, but also in IO, especially when I was applying. And one of the most insightful advice I was given was to be more assertive, especially when negotiating my starting package, because men tend to list exactly what they need to be successful for their lab. And if, for instance, the institution try to negotiate or say, no, you're not going to get this, they usually leave the table and move on. While women tend to, say, okay, I would be able to make it, because that's what we do every day. I think, when you have curveball from your kids, you just adapt and do your thing. So I was told to, when you negotiate, which I think it's not necessarily something easy to do because it might be anchoring your mind, but to be more assertive about your needs, because this is really what you need to be successful. And so on another note, one thing I noticed pre and post-COVID was really the personal discussion about my family. For instance, a lot of people came to me asking me, how was my kid doing during COVID? Was she coping very well? And how, how I was handling all of this. While, I would have preferred for those, because, during COVID, you didn't see your colleagues often. You always see them on Zoom. And so the only time you can see them face to face, I would have loved to talk more about my science than necessarily my family. So that's what I've seen. And I think it's just the perception of women, that during COVID had to stay home with their kids. There is no daycare at the time. So they assume that I was a single mom. I don't know, because my husband is very supportive and always had been very helpful, even when I traveled. And he was the one to always take care of my kid. And I don't think I could have done anything without his support, to be honest, because he was very much around when I needed to go for these conferences, or because I absolutely need to catch this person and I needed to talk to see how we can advance and maybe do a clinical trial together, right? Or a grant application. And I'm just saying that, I perceive pre and post-COVID that people tend to think that women PI are more focused on their family, which is not necessarily the case. It's just, yes, we had to juggle a little bit more because there was no daycare at the time. And my daughter was 3, so you can see a toddler. I remember having Zoom meetings and she was just, Mama, look, I did this. And yes, of course. And, you're happy, but you just want to be taken more seriously. And with the time going on, I actually realized that people were taking me seriously. It's just like Dr. Butterfield said, is your subconscious that is worrying on how you present yourself. But true is, I would have loved people to ask me about my science first. But then eventually I was saying, look, my daughter is fine, but you know what? I have some exciting things to discuss. And this is how you just rewire the conversation to what you'll be doing. And then people, of course they knew. It's just, again, this is your perception about yourself and how you present yourself that might be a bit skewed, I think.
Yeah, so that's a great tactic to kind of redirect the conversation to where you want to go.
Yes.
And we were a little exposed during COVID because everyone could see the children running around and asking questions.
Exactly.
Thank you for that response. Dr. Emens, I was wondering if you could share advice you would give to the next generation of women leaders about how they can navigate challenges they may face as a woman in science and medicine, or any resources that you think they can leverage from more established women leaders in the field as they pursue their path?
Yeah, thanks very much, Charlie. That's a great question. I think the thing that made the biggest difference for me and was also one of the biggest challenges and lessons that I had to learn was the importance of building a really large and diverse network. I'm a highly introverted person, and what's always worked for me is to put my head down and do good work and work really hard. And it's really easy to kind of form a cocoon around yourself at your own institution and just do your stuff. But that's not going to get you where you need to go. So it's really important to keep in mind that there's a big world out there, and you should intentionally build a diverse network, both within your institution, but also outside of your institution. I think all of us have a variety of different domains in our career. So I'm a clinician and I'm a researcher. I had a research lab and I did clinical research. So I built networks of people in all those different domains. And ultimately, as I continued to grow, I had a global network. So I've got colleagues all over the world now. And it's really cool because it creates a lot of opportunities for you, and gives you a lot of opportunities to give back to other people. And I guess, so that, I think that is a key lesson, at least it was for me. And then in terms of resources, I would not be afraid to approach senior leaders in the field, whether they be men or women, because people like to tell their stories, right? And they're flattered if you go to them for advice. So don't be afraid to talk to them about challenges that they faced, or advice that they may have for challenges that you're facing, because they're an important resource and they become a connection in that network as well. So I found that to be critical. So now we'll move on to the last part of our panel discussion and get everyone's suggestions for what we can do to keep the needle moving in a positive direction. So what can organizations like SITC do to help make progress? And what can we as women leaders in the field do? And I'd like to start with Leisha Butterfield. So Leisha, I'm wondering if you can talk about your experience in becoming the first woman president of SITC, as well as the Women Immunotherapy Network that you started. How did you make these amazing things happen? And what are the most important lessons the WIN Leadership Institute can teach young women?
Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about that, Leisha. SITC was a 33-year-old organization, and they had never had a female president. Female leaders in our field had run against our male colleagues for that position and never won. And it's hard not to believe that when you get into the vote, you think, well, yeah, they're both accomplished scientists and physicians, but who's going to be the better leader? And every time that was a man. And so SITC leadership, which was past presidents, all of whom were male, decided that the next president had to be a woman. And so they ran two women. And so there was no way that president was not going to be a woman. And so the funny thing is they ran two blue-eyed, strawberry blonde, pale-skinned women who are interested in cancer immunotherapy, vaccines, and biomarkers against each other. And I won that particular election. So there it was. And for those of us in SITC leadership, what SITC does is they approach you and say, you get to do a thing. What's the thing that you would like to do to have be your presidential legacy? What would you like to contribute to the society and to the field that SITC can get behind you and support? And so that became the Women's Leadership Institute program. And so that's a day and a half program that we started with a number of terrific female leaders that have worked with me on this. And it's to fill in those mentoring gaps. It's to do two things. One, help you form that network. And so that's what SITC, I think, does a lot. You heard about Early Career Scientist Program, Sparkathon program, all of these programs that put people in small groups in the room together from different institutions and have an opportunity to collaborate either one-on-one or as a larger group. And so it would do that. To put a reasonable number of women in the room together, but also to give training on topics. So negotiation, that's one of the most popular ones, because we also sit in our offices and amongst our male colleagues, thinking maybe we're the only one that has these concerns and has never been told how to negotiate and didn't get that from their mentor, and thinks well, I don't ask for too much because what if I don't get the offer then. And so to have senior female leaders give a talk about negotiation, have a panel, and then have open Q&A from the participants, followed by lunch with the participants and dinner with the participants, real opportunity for, whether you're the introvert who just wants to come up afterwards and ask a one-on-one question, or the person who's comfortable getting up and asking in front of the whole group. It provides an opportunity for training in public speaking, networking skills, navigating politics, and a lot of things that I think our junior colleagues need. And so so the goal for the society and for we co-organizers is to feed the pipeline and to make women trained in these things to help themselves in their careers go forward, because the person you think of for the, award, the person you think of to invite to your institution is the person who just gave the keynote at the last meeting you went to and whose cool paper in science you just read. And those are going to be men for the most part still. As we heard, 15% of cancer center directors are women. So those people at the top of our area. So, with the other thing I think that teaches us is consciousness. And so the first time I was at a meeting and there were 3 speakers and they were all women. It was a Keystone meeting and that was like a thing. I mean, people talked about it across the meeting. Oh, it's the women's session. And no one said that about any of the all male sessions. And so, and that has evolved to Collins saying there will be no manels, no all male panels. I won't be a party to it. And, and that's taken 20 more years since I was at that meeting when there was an all female speaker session. And so we have to, feed the pipeline and support each other. And that takes time and energy. And so every time you suggest a speaker, review a resume, think about who you want to vote for the keynote or for the office in SITC. Think about, just check yourself. Check yourself to make sure you're thinking as broadly as possible and not just going with the top 10, male names of people you just saw. Think about it and think, oh, wait, but 2 meetings ago, I heard a really good regular talk from this female investigator, and I want her to give a related talk at this meeting. So, so there's been progress. And recommend the WIN Leadership Institute to your junior colleagues. And I look forward to the comments of my other panelists. Thank you.
So thanks very much. I'd particularly like to thank you for being such a great example and for the important work you did in establishing the WIN Leadership Institute. So thank you very much. Dr. Anderson, I wonder if you might expand or add to what Dr. Butterfield talked about. Is there anything in particular that you could think of that we should be doing more of?
The one thing that I keep coming back to is how much we can do locally. So I think SITC's definitely been on the forefront of making sure that there's gender balance across all its programs, across all its leadership, committees, et cetera. But there's a lot that we can do within our departments, at our local, within our institutions. It's constantly the case that, you give a talk and then a trainee will come up to you. And sometimes they're afraid almost to ask for your time. And, we as a community have to pay it forward. We have to make the time to help those people who just want a sounding board, need some advice, and maybe they're not getting it from their lab mentor, and make sure that we make ourselves available and that we do look for opportunities where maybe we have to do some reaching out. Maybe if there isn't a networking opportunity, we make one at our local institution, at our department, so that we can start building those connections to the next generation.
That's great. That's very in line with the two things I always try to keep top of mind. One is to be generous, and the second is to pay it forward. So I think that's great. Dr. Guerriero, could you talk a little bit about what support networks have helped you and what else SITC could do to provide those types of networks?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I've taken advantage of everything that SITC has offered. I just keep coming back and you've let me be part of it, and I'm so grateful. So I participated in the Sparkathon program back in 2018. This is a program that brings together late-stage postdocs and medical fellows and trainees about to embark on their search for an independent position, and it gives them the tools to succeed in that. How to interview, how to do a chalk talk, how to write grants, how to network. And then the opportunity within the program is to form peer interactions and potential collaborations, and then to meet senior faculty. And so that really made a huge difference in my career because I was able to form these amazing relationships with peers. I now, Jessica Thaxton was one of my Sparkathon colleagues that participated at the same time. We're on each other's R01. We've published together. We're moving science forward in a way that we could not have otherwise done it independently. And then interaction with senior faculty really opened the door. In fact, senior faculty at this program approached me and said, hey, I know you're not looking to come to this institute per se, but why don't you come visit and give a talk, and we'll talk about maybe what a position at my institute might look like. And so Sparkathon made a huge difference. I'm now so fortunate to be a co-organizer of the program with Marco Ruella. And many of those same principles hold true still. So, please encourage colleagues to apply to the program. It's tremendously beneficial. I was a participant in the WIN program, and that made a huge difference. Women have really unique challenges that just are not brought to the table enough. And so the WIN network and retreat just, allows these opportunities to be discussed and shared, and problems are solved and discussed in this really safe environment that was absolutely made huge impact on my career. The other thing I would say is that I did harness Bob when I was a postdoc, and I was at meetings and I talked to people. And one particular interaction was Stephanie Spranger. So Stephanie had come to my institute. She'd given a job talk. It was amazing. And then I ran into her at the SITC annual meeting. And so I didn't know her, but I'd seen her talk and thought she was amazing. And so approached her, we started chatting, and she said, hey, why don't you join the Early Career Scientist Committee for SITC? And so I said, oh, that sounds fun. And so I did. And I would say, anyone who's interested in joining working groups or programs that societies run, you should, but you should do it with purpose, right? You shouldn't just do it to check a box. Do it with intention, do it and do a good job. And if you do a good job, you'll get asked to do another thing that's bigger, right? So then I became the co-chair, and then I became the chair of the Early Career Scientist Committee. And then after that was elected to the board. So I think that these opportunities, these networks are what made all the difference in my career, both scientifically and then also, professionally. And I think, so Charlie and Claire, you guys are chairs of Early Career Scientists Committee. So really remarkable the sort of this trajectory that has stemmed from really, being pretty junior and having a leadership role within SITC.
That's great. Thanks for that perspective. Dr. Vanpouille-Box, Claire, maybe you could comment a little bit on what else you think could be done. I think you're the leader of the Early Career Scientist Committee now. So do you have additional ideas for what we can do to support women?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate to be the chair now, actually. It's my last year of the Early Career Scientist Committee. And, I think what really helped me for as a woman is actually to make friends along the way. It's exactly what Jen just said. Once we are all in this together, and the question you have, you can be sure that in the room somebody else had the exact same question. And so I think, just by talking and say, oh, did you do this? What was your problem? Because I am experiencing this and this and this, and I just don't know how to handle this. What do you think? And even when I started my lab, having this, actually, most of my network started with early career scientists from SITC, who actually, when we introduced ourselves, I realized that 5 of them were working on brain tumors. And so then we started to do what we call now the neuro-immuno-oncology network, where every other week we are organizing a neuro-oncology talk that each lab are presenting. And this is restricted to young PI. I'm sorry, it's not, it's just because sometimes we want to pitch an idea and discuss something that doesn't necessarily work, and you want to be in an informal type of format that you want to be able to discuss that. And so this was really helpful because, for instance, when I started to write my aims for my year 1, I just throw it to all of them, and some of them are not necessarily in radiation oncology. Some were more specialized in myeloid cells, some were more into pediatric brain tumors. So, but at least the concept. Because in study section, you never know who is going to review your grant. They're going to be certainly expert in brain tumors or radiation, but not necessarily the two together. So having feedback was really a tremendous help. So I think having friends that you can turn to, discuss to, and informally discuss it, it's also tremendously helpful. And I would say that those friends are actually also going to introduce you to their mentor. And some of their mentors that became my mentors now. For instance, I can think about Peter Cannell at Columbia, who was very helpful for my year 1 submission. He took the time to read my specification page, even so he never met me because, again, this was during COVID time. So it was I thought I was very fortunate to have senior PI who took the time without knowing me to read but like I said, this really started with a group of young investigators that I met also, like Jen, during Sparkathon. Everything that SITC had offered to grow for the early career scientist is working tremendously. I think you just need to enjoy yourself a little bit, make friends, because to me, actually, a research program is more about a story of the people you meet, right? And then you're going to be discussing, and then your friend is going to say, oh, I can help you with this. And then you're going to have your program expanding because of this and this and this, that, notion you would not necessarily think about. But so for me, having friends, mentors, and, all of the postdoc you had been interacting during your postdoc or whatever you name it, they're going to be the next generation of PI. So they're going to be your colleague, and they're going to be reviewing your grant at the end of the day. So, keeping and starting the network that's very early on is very helpful. At least that's what was the case for me.
That's great. Thanks so much. Charlie, Dr. Garnett-Benson, turning to you, what resources should exist currently in the cancer immunotherapy space to support women? And have you seen any unique programs in industry relative to academia?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as I was listening to the other panelists, I was thinking, man, SITC has already done a tremendous amount with the WIN network, and then obviously trying to get women into leadership roles and all of these other efforts. But one of the things I was thinking about when I was thinking about sort of the WIN network is that one of the programs that we have in industry, because they're very into, people, business, resource groups, they call them. So women would be classified as one of those. And in that group, one of the things that's powerful about it is that they do include men. So all people, they have a Black resource group, they have a Latina, but it's not limited to that group. And I think particularly for the women one, as I go to those programs that they offer for the company, is that the men are the ones that are in the places already. And as I mentioned, for my mentors, they've been sponsors because I know they're back there opening doors and mentioning my name in the room when I'm not there. And so I understand the concept of a safe space for women. And you want to talk about, women's things without having to feel like, the men don't really get it or understand. But I think the counter to that is that the men have to be in the room to, one, hear it, think about their bias, maybe think about some of the things that they don't think about on a day-to-day, and then be there to sort of help, right, elevate and expand the leadership and the other opportunities for women. So I do think that maybe having something that, in addition to what we already have, maybe incorporates the men in the room too, to also educate them and, to have more of a dialogue, because it doesn't really help to just talk about it in a room and then they get there and then they kind of feel like they're not a part of the conversation and a part of the solution. So that's maybe one thing. And then the other thing I was thinking is I always meet all these wonderful women and scientists doing all of this work through SITC, but it's like I do it on a one-on-one as I meet someone and we have a panel and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I hear that story. And I just wonder from the female or woman perspective, if there was a way to maybe amplify those stories of women, like, who gets the award, at the annual meeting. And so those are new women that you'll now follow and be interested in their research. But, maybe something as simple as even just sort of, social media ways that now we're amplifying stories of the research and, women and their career trajectory maybe more routinely, so that, one, it's a place for you to know who the person is and what their research is. But as, Claire and Jen said, you can reach out to these people then. If you know a little bit about them, it's a name and now you have maybe a contact. And so it might make that peer mentorship connectivity between women even more than just, WIN, which is really kind of a more selected group of women. It could be a way to sort of filter that out to additional women in the organization. But I think there's so much the organization is already doing. It's been really fantastic to be a part of and benefit from myself.
So thank you very much. Those are two really great additional suggestions for other things that we can do. I think the take-home message for me is that the impact of becoming deeply involved in a professional organization like SITC on your career is really immeasurable. And for our viewers, we welcome you to our ranks, so please join us. There's lots of opportunity for you here to meet new people and grow your networks and develop your leadership skills through SITC activities. So please consider joining us. We're at the end of our time together. So as we conclude the panel discussion, I would sincerely like to thank all of today's participants for sharing your professional and personal stories and your suggestions for how we can move the needle forward towards impactful change for everyone in the field, including men. I'd also like to thank our viewers, and I hope you found this panel discussion informative and enlightening. As we learned today, there's still considerable room for progress across the board, and I will make sure that SITC continues to identify avenues that bring new opportunities to further diversify the field. We look forward to continuing these conversations in the future, and we hope that you will too within your own networks. So thank you to the panelists for your participation, and thank you to the viewers for your attention. Have a good day, everybody.